The boardroom was glass-walled, skyline-backed, and filled with the tension of ideal moments from closing. Executives sat around the long, dark table in tailored suits, flipping through the final contract of a $28 million merger they'd been bragging about for weeks. The CEO raised a pen. "Let's make it official." But before the pen could hit paper, the doors opened. She walked in quietly. No announcement, no assistant, just a black folder in her hands and a steady gaze that didn't blink once. The youngest person in the room, the most underestimated, the one they had laughed at during her first week on the job. Her heels clicked as she crossed the room without hesitation. "We need to stop this," she said, her voice even. The room laughed at first. One VP, the same one who'd once told her to let the adults work, leaned back in his chair. "This is a board meeting, not a learning seminar." She didn't flinch. Instead, she opened a folder and placed the papers down in front of the CEO. Stamped in red, bold letters across the front. "Terminated." "What the hell is this?" someone snapped. "Contract suspension," she replied. "No one authorized this," another barked. She pointed to a signature block on the third page. "Actually, your late founder did 14 years ago. Page 97, Clause 12C, Emergency Freeze Authority." Legal's eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" "From the Charter Archive," she said. "It applies to ethics concerns surrounding executive activity. And this deal," she turned the page, "has multiple." Someone tried to speak, but her voice was louder. "Fake vendor routing, conflicted interests, and one board member has equity in the acquired firm." A silence dropped like glass shattering. The CEO stood, red in the face. "You are out of line." She didn't move. "I'm in compliance." A legal advisor started flipping through their tablet in panic. Someone else whispered, "Do we just fire the owner?" She turned slowly to the room. "No," she said. "You just try to fire the only person who could stop you from burning this company down." Gasps. One executive sat back, stunned. Another reached for his water and missed the glass. In her hand was the original founder's signature. On the table was the corpse of a $28 million deal. And at the head of the table, a woman they said wouldn't last a week. Just prove she could end them. In one sentence. Tiana Mercer walked in her first day at Caldwell Lang and Company with more nerves than confidence. She had triple-checked the office dress code, memorized the finance team org chart, and still felt like she was stepping onto a stage where no one wanted her in the cast. The moment she introduced herself to the floor manager, he glanced at her resume and said, "All right, you're the one from the outreach hire." It wasn't even a full sentence, but it told her everything. She was the diversity placement, the quarterly checkbox, the one they assumed would fumble out within weeks and become someone else's problem. They gave her a workstation near the printer, no onboarding materials, and a login that didn't work for 3 days. By the end of the week, no one had added her to the finance Slack. But Tiana noticed more than they realized. She noticed how they laughed when she asked for access to the budget dashboard, how they spoke in half sentences when she walked by, how her supervisor referred to her as the intern, even though her title was junior financial analyst. Still, she didn't correct them. She didn't push back. She listened. They dumped the worst client accounts on her desk. Accounts with overlapping vendors, outdated spreadsheets, and addresses that didn't even resolve in the system. But instead of panicking, she started mapping them. Quietly, thoroughly, like a forensic accountant with something to prove. She worked late, cleaned data, flagged inconsistencies, sent polite summaries no one replied to. Meanwhile, in the executive wing, buzz swirled about the company's biggest acquisition to date, a $28 million merger with a firm called Corvale Integrated. The internal pitch decks were flashy. Global synergy, scalable profit pipeline, expansion without risk. But what caught Tiana's eye was a single invoice routed through an unfamiliar third-party processor, Ellesmer Capital Group. She Googled the address. It came back to a shuttered bakery in Phoenix. She didn't say anything yet. Instead, she opened the company's internal charter, a 174-page PDF buried in an employee portal no one had touched since 2010. And on page 97, she found something she wasn't supposed to, a clause titled Emergency Deal Freeze. It granted temporary suspension rights to a small set of roles, including her own, if a proposed deal showed signs of internal ethical breach. She stared at the clause for a long time. Then she printed it, highlighted it, and folded it into a folder marked personal. Because while they were placing bets on how soon she'd quit, Tiana Mercer was preparing to become the most dangerous person in the building, the one they'd never see coming. The deeper Tiana dug, the more deliberate the clause appeared. It wasn't just legal fluff buried for liability. It was written in plain, unmistakable language, almost like the founder had anticipated the exact kind of arrogance now spreading through the boardroom. The clause had a title, 12C, Emergency Deal Freeze Provision, and it was clear. It allowed any internal employee, certified in ethics and tied to deal review, to pause any major financial agreement if they submitted documented irregularities and filed written notice before the contract was executed. No board approval, no CEO override, just facts. And Tiana had both. She kept digging. The more she traced the financials behind the Corvale merger, the more she uncovered. That shell firm, Elsmer Capital, it wasn't just sketchy. It was fake. It was listed as an advisory partner on a vendor pipeline that funneled over $4 million into projected invoices, despite having no staff, no tax ID, and no digital presence. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from confirmation. She checked the acquisition paperwork again, and there it was. Elsmer was recommended by a senior executive, Dalton Reeves, the same man who once told her, "You can't fix numbers with attitude." She printed everything, vendor forms, timestamps, internal emails, even metadata from private equity memos that revealed Corvale's valuation had been deliberately inflated to trick investors and push the deal through. In short, the company was being scammed, or worse, complicit. And the only reason no one had noticed was because no one ever looked past the girl near the printer. But she mattered now. Tiana outlined the breach, drafted a formal freeze notification, and hovered her finger over the submit button. Once she filed this, there would be no going back. She'd be labeled a whistleblower, a disruptor, a threat. But she didn't flinch, because while they ignored her title, they hadn't read their own bylaws. She had the power, and now she had the trigger. At 11:52 p.m., she uploaded the clause and all supporting documents. She submitted the formal freeze order under Clause 12C. She blind copied internal legal. She timestamped it with external validation. 4 minutes later, a confirmation pinged back. Notice received, deal on hold pending review. The next morning, she walked into the office, like it was any other Friday. But everything had changed. Executives were whispering. The acquisition team looked like someone had pulled the emergency brake mid-launch. And Dalton Reeves? He passed her in the hallway, without a word, because Tiana Mercer didn't just find the founder's clause. She activated it. And now, the empire that mocked her was legally frozen, under her signature. The moment the deal freeze went live, Tiana felt it. Not a celebration, but a shift, a pressure, like walking into a room where everyone knows you broke the spell. It didn't come with shouting. It came with silence, with suddenly quiet Slack channels, with group chats she used to be CC'd on, now oddly missing her name. Her calendar, once filled with finance huddles, was stripped bare. 2 meetings remained, one with HR, one labeled performance alignment. The message wasn't subtle. She hadn't just pressed pause on a deal. She'd broken their illusion of control. And in a place like Caldwell Lang and Company, control was everything. Dalton Reeves didn't confront her. He smiled more. He called her kiddo again. He leaned over her desk and said softly, "You know, it's better to ask questions before pulling emergency levers." She closed her laptop without looking up. "I followed protocol," she said. "You should read it sometime." By Monday, her access to the budgeting dashboard was temporarily revoked. The finance bulletin left her name off entirely. Even the casual hallway nods became scarce. Then came the break room ambush. A director she barely knew offered fake concern. "There's chatter you're trying to make a name for yourself. Just be careful." This place isn't kind to people who color outside the lines. She nodded, smiled, and walked away. But inside, she wasn't afraid. She was boiling. Not with rage, with recognition. They weren't mad at what she did. They were mad she had the power to do it. That afternoon, HR called her in. Glass office. Too many smiles. They asked if she was still feeling aligned with the firm's values. If she saw a future here. She answered every question calmly. No emotion. No edge. Then, as she stood to leave, she paused. Will this meeting be noted in my file? The HR rep blinked. No, should it be? Yes, Tiana said. I like to keep receipts. By Wednesday, another meeting was added to her calendar. Unscheduled performance review from Dalton's office. That's when she knew. They weren't planning to dispute her freeze. They were planning to remove her, fire her, erase her, then push the deal through again with no one left to block it. But they were already too late. Tiana had sent everything. To legal, to compliance, to the external audit firm tied to the founder's estate. She wasn't just playing defense. She was laying traps. And when she walked into the strategy meeting later that week, holding a folder they assumed she'd never see, her presence didn't spark curiosity. It sparked panic, because suddenly, the analyst they ignored wasn't just annoying. She was dangerous. Friday morning came dressed like celebration. Catered breakfast, polished shoes, investor calls queued, smiles rehearsed. Dalton Reeves stood by the glass, adjusting his tie, already referring to himself as lead negotiator in emails. The Corvale merger was set to close at 9 a.m. No delays, no dissent. At 8:52, the doors opened. Tiana Mercer walked in. No introduction, no hesitation, just a black folder and the weight of everything they underestimated. Dalton looked up, smirking. You're not on the calendar. She placed the folder on the table, sat down, didn't answer. Instead, she opened the folder and slid 2 documents across the table. One, a certified freeze order, signed, stamped, official. 2, a notarized 12C filing, emergency deal freeze. Founder's signature, her signature. A board member leaned forward. Is this real? Legal, at the far end, went pale. Started typing. Fast. This was filed 6 days ago, someone said. The CO narrowed his eyes. Why weren't we told? Tiana tapped the folder. It was emailed to your general counsel's assistant. Page 4. Time stamped. Dalton's jaw clenched. He grabbed the folder. Scan fast, too fast. You can't do this, he snapped. She looked at him. I already did. He stood, raising his voice. You don't have the authority. She cut him off. I do. 14 days of freeze authority. Per founder clause 12C. Still binding. Still active. And you signed the employee handbook. Silence fell. Not like quiet. Like gravity. A senior board member cleared his throat. What's the ethics breach? Tiana reached into her folder again. Receipts. Fake vendor contracts. Circular payment routing. A shell company called Elsmer. A private equity memo embedded in metadata. And then, Dalton's name, tied to indirect equity in Corvale's holding firm. Dalton's hand shot forward. That's private. The board chair's voice cut him down. Sit. Down. Dalton froze. Saturday. Hands trembling. Tiana stayed seated. Still. Unbothered. Any attempt to continue this deal, she said, now constitutes breach of fiduciary duty. That's Section 4, Shareholder Code. Page 11. Legal confirmed it. Out loud. To the entire room. The air changed. Chairs shifted. Pens were set down. Someone exhaled, long, low, like they just realized they were drowning. And then a whisper, no one knows from where. Did we just fire the owner? No one answered, because the only person still steady in that room was the woman they tried to erase. The one holding the contract, the clause, the receipts, and every ounce of the legacy they forgot to protect. The merger collapsed by lunchtime. No public statement, just panic behind glass. Investor calls dropped. Stock alerts triggered. PR scrambled for talking points. By 3 p.m., the Corvale deal was referred to only in past tense. Internally, everything broke open. A full ethics audit was launched. Company-wide, not just finance. Legal, HR compliance. No one was safe from the crosshairs Tiana had quietly drawn. Dalton Reeves? He didn't resign. He was escorted out at 7:14 a.m. Monday morning. Security. Badge deactivated mid-swipe. No speech. No apology. Just a box of items and a door that didn't open again. 2 other VPs resigned within 48 hours. Both had connections to the shell routing scheme. Both issued exit memos loaded with vague phrases like personal growth and strategic pivot. Everyone knew what it meant. Tiana didn't celebrate, didn't gloat, didn't even post a quote on LinkedIn. She just showed up. Same clothes, same walk, same desk near the printer. But now every eye followed her. HR, the same people who once questioned if she was culturally aligned, sent a formal apology. Corporate sanitized, paper thin. Still, she framed it. The real shift came 2 days later. The board reached out, offered her a new position, lead ethics analyst, direct access to the shareholder committee. She didn't say yes. Not immediately. She read the contract, redlined every clause, sent it back with 2 demands. A mentorship program for overlooked hires, a live audit trail visibility tool for junior staff. The board passed both, unanimously. No pushback, no edits, because they knew they had underestimated the only person in the building who knew where every broken wire ran. 1 week later, she walked past Dalton's old office. It was being repainted. She paused at the doorway, watched the brush glide over the wall like it was erasing more than paint. It was erasing history. Her new office? Simple, mid-size, same floor as the analysts. And when an intern nervously approached her with a question about a weird bonus allocation, Tiana didn't blink. She opened her laptop, pulled up the logs, and said 2 words, keep everything. Because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the deal. It was about a system that told people like her to be quiet, stay low, play nice. And she rewrote the rulebook, not by shouting, by highlighting the line no one else read. By quarter's end, Caldwell Lang and company looked the same from the outside. But inside, everything had changed. Not because of branding, not because of press, because fear had been replaced with facts, and silence had been replaced with systems. Executives who once ruled by tone now paused before every send, every spreadsheet, every signature. Junior staff who once whispered their doubts now had access, support, receipts. At the center of it all stood Tiana Mercer. No new title, no spotlight, just presence. She still wore the same neutral tone blazers, still kept her head down in meetings, until it was time to speak. And when she did, everyone listened. They offered her the corner office. She declined. I don't need the biggest room, she said, just the clearest line of sight. So she chose a glass-walled office. 2 floors down, same hallway as the analysts. Door always open. On her back wall, one thing was framed. Clause 12C, Emergency Deal Freeze. Signed by the founder. Activated by T. Mercer, March 16th. But her real move came next. Quiet. Intentional. She built something called the Clause Network. It wasn't public. It wasn't flashy. It was a shared database of buried protections, like the one she had used, pulled from HR manuals, corporate bylaws, and forgotten policy PDFs. And she sent them, anonymously, to analysts, to assistants, to interns in other companies. One morning, a letter arrived. No name, just initials, MC, and 1 sentence. Used your template. Froze a $12 million payout. Saved 100 jobs. She smiled, not because she needed validation, but because she realized this wasn't just her story anymore. Later that week, she attended a round table. As she reached for coffee, a former executive, one who once voted to terminate her, gestured nervously. So, we're good now, right? Tiana looked at him. Calm, clear. Depends, she said. Are we staying ethical? He didn't respond, just nodded, and stepped back. She walked away, sipping her coffee. Not angry, not triumphant, just prepared. Because she hadn't just canceled a $28 million deal. She installed a firewall, not in the network, in the culture, quiet, permanent, self-replicating. And somewhere, in a basement folder, or a PDF no one's opened in years, another nobody was already reading, already planning,